wasn't just one type of tithe. And so with Levi here, the accusation against them, or the rebuke against them, is that they were not doing the right thing with the tithe they received. So they were called robbers. So that's not even for everybody. That wasn't even for, even in Old Covenant, that wasn't even for the whole congregation of Israel at the time. Yet we use that scripture as a foundation to say if a person doesn't bring tithes, that they're robbing. And I don't know how deep we want to go into that. I just believe that if you're going to establish that, you can't use this scripture when you look at it in context. You can't use this scripture to establish that. That's
Yes.
my commentary on that part.
And I agree with you. So this is the next thing we're going to. We're going to go to Deuteronomy. This is the scripture that none of them go to. I think they're afraid to go to this one. I can't believe that. Let me say it like this. I can't believe that people just don't know if they're in ministry. I'm not saying that they don't. There's some, I'm sure, that don't know this exists. But it's hard for me to accept that people who harp on this thing about tithes have not studied to the point where they know that this exists in the Bible. This is one that I've only heard taught one time by one preacher other than me. I'm just saying, man, like I have not heard anybody else teach on this. And but anyway, Deuteronomy chapter 14. And when I say I taught on it, meaning I have brought it up to people because I haven't been in a place where I felt like people were ready to hear it yet. And so I've only shared it with certain people in a private setting that, when the subject came up, I was like, oh boy, let's go. Let's get it. I got something for you. So Deuteronomy chapter 14. And I'm going to start at verse 22. You shall truly tithe all the increase of your seed that the field brings forth year by year. And you shall eat before the Lord your God. The key word is eat. Hold on to that word as we continue. You shall eat before the Lord your God in the place which he shall choose to place his name there. What are you going to eat? The tithe of your corn, of your wine, and of your oil, and the firstlings of your herds and of your flocks, that you may learn to fear the Lord your God always. I could really stop right there because they don't read that alone. Most of these preachers out here, I've never heard this used in an offering, that's for sure.
You're not going to hear that in the offering.
Oh, I'm sure I'm not.
No, sir.
So the next verse says, and if the way be too long for you, which is that way, the way to wherever the Lord put his name. If it's too long for you to travel there, so that you are not able to carry it, that means you can't carry the tithe of your corn, of your wine, of your oil, and the firstlings of your herds and of your flocks. You can't carry all that to where he put it, put his name. Then this is what you do. Then he says, if the place be too far from you, which the Lord your God shall choose to set his name there, when the Lord your God has blessed you, notice that God blessed you already. And then now guess what you about to do? You about to eat tithe of what he blessed you with. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm hurting some people right now. I could tell.
Yeah.
Then shall you turn it into money and bind up the money in your hand, and shall go unto the place which the Lord your God shall choose. And you shall bestow that money for whatsoever your soul lusts after, for oxen, for sheep, for wine, or for strong drink, or for whatsoever your soul desires. And you shall eat there before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice, you and your household. Now, the next verse. And the Levite that is within your gates, you shall not forsake him, for he has no part nor inheritance with you.
Right.
And this is very key right here, because we're talking about a day and age when these people did not work a job. Now, there
the
are
Levites.
women, huh?
You're referring to the Levites.
The Levites, yes.
Yeah.
These Levites did not work a job, and they also did not inherit any land. They were the only tribe that did not get land. And I remember something about the patrimony of their fathers or something like that they did receive, which was kind of like an inheritance almost. Do you know what I'm talking about, Terrence?
No.
Okay, we'll get into that a little bit later. But anyway, so the bottom line is, he said, don't neglect the Levites. They do not have a part nor inheritance with you. At the end of, 3 years, you shall bring forth all the tithe of your increase in the same year, and shall lay it up within your gates. So, first of all, it depends on how you read this. Now, I don't know how you reading it right now, bro, but the way I read this is, whatever your tithe was in the year that you about to tithe, that's the tithe that you bring in that 3rd year. Is that how you see it, or?
Yeah, I would go that way. But I just want to say this while you're digging into that. I just want to say, just for the record, we understand that the Levitical priesthood is not in operation right now. That's what goes back to what you read earlier about Melchizedek's order and that priesthood. So the law changed with the changing of priesthood. And then also the Temple of Jerusalem is not set up, or when he talks about the place where he put his name, he's talking about the place that would be the epicenter of worship, or where all offerings would go, where people would migrate to in order to bring all these things. So we're getting into it, but really it's kind of like it's obsolete in this day and time, because we can't do it anyway. All the stuff that it's saying to do, this law regarding how you should bring the tithe, but you're eating the tithe, you're bringing it, and then some people make the mistake of just trying to say, well, because we're in this day, there was no money in that day, and so everything that it says about the crops and all that, that's money. But then we see clearly that you just read where it showed how they would convert the harvest into money, which means they did have money in that day, which means you can't use that in order to establish, everything that he's saying about the harvest, now that's just money. So to me, the argument is like, it's a dead point, because we are not in this time. Whether you view yourself as a part of Israel or not, you can't even do what Moses is telling the people to do right now. So to try to use this to establish tithe in the way we see it in modern day local churches, it's a far stretch. It's reaching and it's off. It's off.
Exactly. And that is the whole point of this podcast today, because we're just trying to expose things that are not appropriated correctly, that are misunderstood and misquoted. So I'm only bringing these out for that purpose, not to say anything about us tithing, because in the New Testament, and there's a lot of people that try to argue this point, but there's certain things that the Lord very much focused on in the New Testament. And one of them was not tithes. So I'm gonna just leave that at that for right now.
But because you said that, before you go to another one, I just want to say what many people will use and say, but Christ did say when he was talking about the Pharisees,
tithe mint and cumin and all that stuff, but
when
you
he said, do as they say, but not as they do. And he talks about they pay tithes and offering, but that was still prior to the new covenant, even though because the Gospels, people don't realize that the Gospels, most of that is reflecting, it's still old covenant. It's the transition, even though Christ is there, it's still old covenant. So even when he's saying do as they're saying, because they're saying it according to the law, he never did anything to contradict or to destroy the law. He upheld it. And so he was still saying, do as they do, as they say, excuse me, but not as they do. So he did encourage tithe in that, but that was still before the changing of the priesthood. But go ahead. I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I agree. Deuteronomy verse 29, this is where I'm going to stop on this one. And the Levite, because he has no part nor inheritance with you, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow, which are within your gates, shall come and shall eat and be satisfied, that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hand which you do. Now, we do see in the New Testament, rather, we do see where the Lord talks about, we see where it talks about orphans, it talks about widows, it talks about those type of people that we should be taking care of. Hold on. Now, one of the things that it says before I actually find the verse, it talks about widows being 60 and older. And the reason for that is those that were under the age of 60 would be considered young enough to still remarry. They wouldn't be, someone that was like, I'm not going to get married again. They actually would, if they was over 60, then they would be considered someone that needed to be taken care of by the church, if they just decided they weren't going to remarry. Now, according, James chapter 1, verse 27, it talks about pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless, that's orphans, and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. So that is a visiting. Now, here in 1 Timothy chapter 5, rather. Okay, let me start at verse 3. It says, honor widows that are widows indeed. But if any widow have children or nephews, let them learn first to show piety at home and to requite their parents, for that is good and acceptable before God. Let me stop here. I remember there was this time, I forget who said what to me, but somebody said something to me that really got me angry. And it was talking about me giving to a church. And I said, well, guess what? My mother needs what you want me to give to your church, right, or to this church or whatever. My mother needs that. Yeah. My money is going to my mother.
That's right.
And that's what the Bible is telling us right here, that we're supposed to take care of widows. We're supposed to take care of women that are older, that have children. Their children should be helping them in certain ways. You know what I'm saying? It is not something that, they should take their money and just give it to the church and never do anything for their family.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? If there's a need that's in their family and God looks at you and he says, I need you to take care of your family. The Bible even tells us a man that doesn't take care of his family is worse than an infidel.
No doubt.
You're worse than a sinner. So if you're not taking care of your own household first, above any and everything, then you're worse than a